Have you ever wondered why some of our absolute favourite UK sitcoms just didn't quite land when they were remade in America? In this video we're going to take a look at some of the top British comedies that just didn't translate in the US. We'll be exploring why that might be. Get ready to compare the beloved originals with their American cousins and see how they went down. At number 27 in the ranker list of the all-time best British sitcoms is Absolutely Fabulous. The concept for Absolutely Fabulous came from a sketch called Modern Mother and Daughter in a French and Saunders show where Saunders was the mother named Adriana and French was the daughter named Saffron, as in the series. The series exposes the lives of ineffectual public relations agent Adina Monsoon and her hard partying magazine editor best friend forever, Patsy Stone, in all their absurd excess. Their obsession with youth, appearance and hedonism leads them into countless bizarre situations, making this satirical sitcom as bold and as intoxicating as a bottle of Bolly. Watching from the sidelines is Adina's grown-up and far more mature daughter, Safi. They even made parts of 2 episodes in New York, the spiritual home of their celebrity idols, suggesting that their glitz and excess would fit in with the American audience. Roseanne Barr was keen to launch an American version of Ab Fab on the ABC network that included casting legendary Carrie Fisher alongside Barbara Carrera. That version of the series never materialised and American viewers would have to wait until 2008 when Sony and BBC Worldwide joined forces with Fox to produce a pilot. However, in the final series of her own show, Roseanne, in 1997, Joanna Lumley and Jennifer Saunders made guest appearances as their Ab Fab characters, Adina and Patsy. Meanwhile, in a copycat scenario on CBS in 1995 was the sitcom High Society, starring Jean Smart and Mary McDonnell. Smart said, "I did an American version of Ab Fab, although at the time I didn't know I was doing an American of Ab Fab. It was called High Society with Mary McDonnell." She wasn't making an American version of Ab Fab, it was a poor imitation. Both characters in High Society are far more industrious than Adina and Patsy. Smart said, "I got to play this alcoholic, pill-popping, fabulously dressed writer of trashy romance novels, and Mary was my best pal and my publisher who got her publishing company in a divorce. It was just so much fun and I lusted after her 17-year-old son." High Society lasted for 13 episodes before it was cancelled. A reviewer on IMDb said the constant comparison to Ab Fab seems to state more about the utter lack of imagination on the part of the reviewers than an actual likeness. Ab Fab was scored along the lines of Benny Hill and High Society was scored closer to some of the modern day TV comedies like Scrubs or Desperate Housewives. The script for the 2008 Fox pilot titled Ab Fab was written by Christine Zander of Saturday Night Live. She was also executive producer with the BBC's Ian Moffat and series creator Jennifer Saunders. By this time, 36 of the original episodes of Absolutely Fabulous had already been broadcast on Comedy Central, PBS, BBC America and Oxygen, making the show an instant cult hit. Third Rock from the Sun star Kristen Johnson and future WandaVision villain Catherine Hahn were cast as the leads, living it up in Los Angeles. Zosa Mamet completed the trio as the eternally embarrassed Safi. Patsy's American character was pretty much identical to Joanna Lumley's creation, as Johnson wears the familiar skin-tight leggings, giant sunglasses and her hair in a beehive. Meanwhile, Adina is also a copycat recreation of Jennifer Saunders' character, with the same hairstyle and memorable clothing, trying to recapture her youth. On Twitter, one user typed, "I love how you can tell they all know they're committing a heinous crime." Another said, "I am a huge Ab Fab fan. These are great actresses, but this is awful." The pilot was rejected by the network and plans for a full series were ditched. Apparently, middle-aged women misbehaving just aren't funny over there. Anarchic sitcom The Young Ones is at number 23 in the list of the best all-time British sitcoms. featuring the lives of 4 mismatched university students from very different backgrounds, sharing dilapidated digs, prepare for anarchy in all its comic glory, with a generous helping of surrealism, slapstick and social commentary. Their turbulent interactions and oddball adventures never failed to deliver, plus live musical acts. The original show was too irreverent for the uptight US networks, although it began airing on MTV in America in June 1985. In 1990, Fox decided to commission a remake of The Young Ones, but insisted on the baffling title, Oh No Not Them. Possibly they thought the Americans might be confused if the show shared the title of a Cliff Richard single, although of course that was the point. The character Rick, played by the late Rick Mayall, was an overly enthusiastic Cliff Richard fan. However, the Beatles' 1966 track Tomorrow Never Knows was used as the theme tune, which was more suited to psychedelic-influenced hippie Neil, played by Nigel Planer, the only original cast member to cross the pond to appear in the show. It seems the Americans wanted there to be a hero character, which might have influenced the choice of music, especially as they had the original actor to play the part. The Young Ones' producer Paul Jackson had to explain to them that the audience didn't need to like any of the characters. That's the whole point, he said. They're all despicable characters. Despite this, as Jackson remembered, if you watch the pilot, they make Neil kind of a softie really, totally missing the point. According to Robert Llewellyn, Planer was not very happy in America. Llewellyn wrote, "Nigel was the only member of the British cast to go. He had experienced a fairly hideous time, worried sick that he was going to have to stay there for 6 years with a group of people he hated." Apparently, Planer accused the producers of making the Young Ones into a sort of grubby Benny Hill show. Fortunately for him, the pilot was a flop and he was released from his contract. Another odd choice was to amalgamate Rick and Vivian into one character, Adrian. While they both had rebellious similarities, their behaviour and political affiliations were quite different. The English punk band Charged GBH, who are still performing today, made an appearance in the pilot as guest performers. It's interesting that the producers kept the incongruous live band in the show, considering the other well-known tropes that they threw out. The unaired pilot has never seen the light of day. All that has been seen of the show is the very amateur animated title sequence that was leaked online. Apart from that, no footage, images or audio from the pilot have resurfaced in any form, and the remainder of it remains a mystery. Filmmaker Ross K. Fode was given a script for Oh No Not Them in 2009 by a crew member who suggested making a short film based on the concept and reveal what had been planned. It was 6 years before Fode was able to make the video. It was titled Young Ones, Armed and Stupid. It was posted on YouTube, although it's since been removed. In the video, Neil gets tricked into giving his house keys to a mugger. This leads to the boys arming themselves to defend an inevitable attack. However, it soon degenerates into an all-out war with Vivian versus Rick and Neil. At number 21 in the list of all-time best British sitcoms is long-running Channel 4 sitcom Peep Show. The show is filmed uniquely from the first-person perspective of each of the characters and centres around 2 mismatched flatmates as we hear their inner monologues while they navigate life's absurdities. Fox commissioned a pilot in 2005 starring Jonathan Galecki and Josh Myers before their respective appearances on The Big Bang Theory and That 70s Show, and considering those later shows, we might have been in for something exceptional. However, original Peep Show creators Sam Bain and Jesse Armstrong were not involved in the production, and it showed. They kept many of the scenarios from the British show but Americanised the language and some of the humour. This resulted in a script which was clunky and unlikable. They even managed to make the characters unpleasant and boring. Johnny Galecki as Mark was far too good looking and normal for the role. Although he tries to act geeky and inept with women, he fails. He's slovenly and sad in a horrible flat lusting after his attractive neighbour. Well, they just invented the format for the Big Bang Theory. At one point he decides he wants to get into a fight with Jeremy, making him basically the opposite of the British version. There was no chemistry between the lead actors. Perhaps that fight might have been a good idea, if nothing else but to actually make them passionate about something. The most notable thing about this version was the absence of the point of view camera shots that made Peep Show so fresh and exciting in the first place. Thankfully, the commissioning executives didn't like it, so the pilot wasn't made into a series and remained in the vaults. But we finally got to look at it when it leaked online in 2015. Having ditched the point of view camera work, they had opted for 1990s MTV style odd angles, zippy camera work and fast cuts. Jesse Armstrong later commented, "It was really a rather anemic, half-hearted version that made you wonder why they'd been attracted to the show in the first place." In 2008, RDF USA and Objective Productions, the company behind the original Channel 4 sitcom, were commissioned by Spike TV for another go at a remake. Original creators Sam Bain and Jesse Armstrong wrote the scripts, so that was a positive. Executive producer Chris Colleen said, "This is a huge favourite in the UK. In adapting the format, we had a lot of funny material to draw from, but we slightly tweaked it to make it more American." After filming completed on a half-hour pilot in Chicago, Jesse Armstrong said, "It's encouraging. I think Spike haven't made their decision, but it looks very good to us. The leads are great and we await what Spike wants to do." Spike spiked the pilot, never to be seen again. Meanwhile, in 2009, the original series aired in America on Hulu. By 2016, the original Peep Show had developed a cult following in America, thanks to episodes also being available on YouTube and Netflix. There was another attempt at a remake pilot by Starz in 2016, with the show's original creators Sam Bain and Jesse Armstrong as consulting producers. Eli Jorne was contracted as showrunner and executive producer. He was also entrusted with writing all the episodes. He did at least acknowledge the task he was undertaking, saying, "I'm grateful to Sam and Jesse for entrusting me with the 9 seasons worth of insightful, darkly hilarious material that I can hopefully pass off to American audiences as my own." So, third time lucky? Apparently not. There is very scant information available about this particular remake, apart from one of the stars being Dana De Lorenzo. It clearly failed. Probably the pilot did not even get made, as no other information has been published. Undeterred by the previous 3 failed attempts, it was time for Disney-owned FX to have a go. The script was developed by Carey Dornito, who has writing credits on shows like Arrested Development. Sam Bain, one of the co-creators of the original Peep Show, was also involved as an executive producer. While taking inspiration from the original's unique narrative format, the point of view filming and internal monologues, the premise was shifted to a workplace setting. An even bigger change was to make this version a gender-swapped adaptation, with 2 female leads taking on the roles analogous to Mark and Jeremy. However, much like the 2016 Starz attempt, the 2019 FX pilot was also not picked up for a series. It was not shown on television, and specific details about the casting beyond the premise and writer were not made widely available. So you'd think it was time to give up altogether after 4 failed attempts, but no, FX was going to have another try. This time they chose Emmy-nominated Stefani Robinson as writer and executive producer for the series, starting with the pilot. As in the previously dumped effort, 2 female characters would play the leads. The manager-assistant relationship was due to be maintained. According to several sources, the point-of-view shots and internal monologues were being kept. Both Jesse Armstrong and Sam Bain were on board as executive producers, with Minnie Driver and Amanda Java cast as the leads in the show. Sam Bain wrote in The Guardian, "I can't wait to find out what sick and twisted bullshit goes on in the minds of a pair of female losers." An anonymous commenter on the Deadline website wrote, "This has utterly nothing to do with the original. The original was about 2 awkward roommates and their awkward lives. Why is this being called Peep Show? Wouldn't it have been cheaper to just make their own new IP instead of drawing the ire of fans of the original by doing exactly what they're doing now? This looked like the final straw for British fans, who roundly criticised the changes to the original. Someone on the Cooked and Bombed forum wrote, "It's like somebody picked all the zeitgeisty things together and thought, that'll work. Jesse Armstrong, check. Tech Bros, Gals, check. Gender swap, check." As of April 2025, there hasn't been any official announcement about whether FX have even made the pilot or if the project was abandoned before getting that far. That's 5 attempts. It really is time to call a day on American Peep Show. However, don't despair. David Mitchell and Robert Webb's back, and Mitchell's hit BBC comedy Ludwig are both getting second series, and US remakes are planned. At number 19 on the list of best all-time British sitcoms is the 1970s Are You Being Served? Set in Grace Brothers' department store, it was famous for Mrs. Slocum of the bouffant hair and Mr. Humphries, who, when summoned, would reply, "I'm free!" Sorry. The store that sold everything with a touch of slapstick and risque innuendo. In 1979, producer Gary Marshall invited Jeremy Lloyd and David Croft to Hollywood with the ambitious objective of recreating their popular BBC sitcom Are You Being Served? For CBS. The show was going to be called Going Up, echoing the lyrics of the British theme tune, but a new theme tune was written for the show which was described as atrocious. There was a real department store chain called Grace Brothers in the United States, operating primarily in the southeastern states, so the name had to change. So, for the title, they settled on Beans of Boston, as it was the name of the store, there being a pun in the name on the basis that the store was a has-been. Beans of Boston was just like Are You Being Served, a department store set in its old-fashioned ways while the rest of the world around it changes. This is suitably depicted in the opening credits for Beans of Boston, showing the images of the shop through time as the city develops, and eventually the store is swamped with skyscrapers. The set was practically identical and most of the characters were there. The only significant difference was changing Mr. Rumble's character to old Mr. Bean's nephew, Franklin, running the department, apparently into the ground. The only actor credited by critics for doing a good job in his characterisation was John Hillerman as Mr. Peacock. There is no class distinction in America like Britain of the 1970s, and he's not a captain. You'll remember Hillerman for his role as General Factotum Jonathan Quayle Higgins in Magnum P.I. He nearly didn't get the part. Apparently he was delayed on his way to an audition, so Jeremy Lloyd put himself forward to play the part. He was convinced to step back by David Croft. Dad's Army fans will know that Croft had to talk Jimmy Perry out of playing the Private Walker role. Clearly, he believed the writers should stay behind the camera. One key character, and I say character in the most colourful meaning of the word, was Mr. Humphries. David Croft remembers one young actor that was a huge success at the Los Angeles Comedy Store coming in to read for Mr. Humphries. Croft thought he was very funny, but his personality was so over the top, he convinced himself that the comic would sabotage the whole production. The actor was Robin Williams. Croft later wrote in his autobiography, "I turned him down and thus prevented myself from becoming a millionaire." Alan Sues got the part, and universal criticism for lacking the subtlety, finesse and comic timing of John Inman, which, to be fair, would be hard to live up to. He was wooden and looked permanently startled. The show is missing the Humphries catchphrase, "I'm free," and I think that was for the best. It's missing because, for the pilot anyway, Mr. Peacock does not individually call his staff to his side when he has something to announce. Alan Sues could not have carried the line. When he did change his pitch of voice from his camp normal to deeper telephone answering voice, the change was almost imperceptible. Mrs. Slocum possessed neither her brightly coloured hair nor her infamous pussy. Miss Brahms was her new assistant in her first day at the store. In Are You Being Served, Mr. Lucas was the new member of staff. Mr. Granger was there, but he might just as well remained asleep in a fitting room for the minor contribution the character was allowed to make. Croft and Perry decided to use the plot of the British series 3-episode German Week for the pilot, the excuse being that Mr. Grace's latest new secretary was German. However, it's clear that they chose this episode for the very same reason the Dad's Army US adaptation, The Rear Guard, remade The Deadly Attachment. It's a good script, visually funny, and was a famous episode from the series. This was not necessarily a good choice for a pilot. The show needed to spend a lot of time establishing the characters for the audience, and then the German Week plot had to be crammed in. While German Week was one of the top rated episodes in the UK, the country, at the time, had a different relationship with the Germans than the Americans did. There were still enough people alive who had been affected by the war. But in America they did not have the same experience, so the aversion to German produce in the UK show was missing, losing the impact of the premise. Something else that was missing was the initial premise of the show, which was the gents department being reduced in size to accommodate the ladies department. This intrusion fueled many of the later conflicts between the departments. As it was ignored, the scope for some future episodes was reduced. Overall, the show was criticised for its lack of chemistry between the cast and lack of subtlety. The British version was not reticent where broad humour was concerned. There was a similar number of occasions that Mr. Grace and Mr. Peacock in particular were looking directly at women's breasts and legs from all angles in both versions. That does not mean it was without humour. The studio audience were on board with the characters, and from a British perspective, some of it worked. CBS aired it once on Saturday the 5th of May 1979, then the shop closed forever. No series was made, it was never broadcast in the UK. American viewers would need to wait nearly a decade before PBS opted to bring the original Are You Being Served over, where the show became a cult favourite. In 2016, the pilot appeared on YouTube courtesy of a home video recording provided to the Museum of Classic Chicago Television. Sadly, the TV reception was not great, so the picture is degraded, but it does seem it's the only way we'll ever get to see the episode, as it's not known if the original tapes still exist. There was a successful remake of Are You Being Served in Australia. Network 10 aired 16 episodes in 2 seasons, with John Inman reprising his role as Mr. Humphreys from the original series, sent there by Mr. Grace to help at his cousin's department store, Bone Brothers. The other characters of the show were directly based on the original characters of the British version, just having new names. Even the set and the conflict between the ladies and menswear departments is identical. The series never ran outside of Australia and has never been repeated on television since the late 1980s. It seems the master tapes were lost or wiped, but 15 episodes from the show were found and uploaded to YouTube, although Season 1 Episode 3 is partially incomplete. So there you have it, a transatlantic journey of comedy that, shall we say, didn't quite stick the landing. From the outrageous antics of Absolutely Fabulous to the chaotic energy of the young ones, the cringe-inducing inner thoughts of Peep Show, 5 times no less, and the department store shenanigans of Are You Being Served. These beloved British gems just couldn't find their footing on American soil. Perhaps it's proof that some comedic magic is uniquely British, or maybe it's just a reminder that lightning doesn't always strike twice, especially across the Atlantic. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.